We'd like to welcome you to the BlackUSA.News morning show. My name is Donnie Glover, and I will be your host today. We are being joined by Ronald Miles, and he's discussing a historic East Baltimore location, Webb Recreation Center. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing exceptionally well, sir. I'm doing exceptionally well.
Okay. So you have behind you the historic Webb
yes,
Memorial Recreation Center, Just Equity. Okay. Tell me about that.
let me tell you about it. I was raised in East Baltimore. I went to this center when I was like 9 years old. And what we have a tendency of doing is we'll walk around our city, but we don't know the importance of some of our edifices. And with this particular center, I was way up in age before I learned of the history of the Webb Memorial Recreation Center.
So share some of that history with us.
I'm going to share that. It started, Baltimore was quite segregated back in the day, back in the 30s and the 40s. But we have this guy, Webb, when many of us think of him as the musician, but very few of us think of him as the philanthropist. So anyway, on his deathbed, it was Webb who indicated to his doctor, Dr. Ralph Jonathan Young, that he wanted to do something for Black youth in Baltimore. All the public facilities was not open to the Black youth. If we take Druid Hill Park, which was not desegregated until 1956, you take Clifton Park, Patterson Park, Riverside, all of those parks. But anyway, what he did was told his friend, Dr. Young, to call on his friend, Dr. Ralph Jonathan Young, who put together a committee. So we went to the city of Baltimore, went to the YMCA. They could not accommodate the Black youth in Baltimore. So Dr. Young called on Webb's friend, Joe Lewis. And he said, Joe Lewis will fill any house. So what they did then was convened and had a concert at the 5th Regiment Armory in February 1940. Webb died in like 1939. And he convened.
Mr. Miles,
yes. Mm-hmm.
Before we go there, we got to tell people a little more about Webb. A lot of people don't know. You know who Webb was. I know who he was.
Okay.
But we got to bring up the importance. A lot of people don't even know who Martin Luther King was, sadly.
Okay. Well, Webb was the most famous drummer during the Harlem Renaissance back in the 30s. Actually, he was born in Baltimore. He grew up in the 1300 block of Ashland Avenue. And he was deformed, and he was the most famous drummer.
He had scoliosis, curvature of the spine.
Yes, some kind of tuberculosis. That spinal. He had a spinal.
Almost like a hunchback.
He was hunchbacked. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he did a number of venues here in Baltimore, but he was most famous for what he did up in New York.
And right, so he left Baltimore, and he became instrumental in the Harlem Renaissance, right?
Absolutely. And again, many people only think of the Savoy where he played, but there was up there was called Jungle Alley. So there was a number of venues. And the most interesting thing about Webb was during the Depression, he was the only Black musician that was pretty much have access to the radio stations and all. And he kept many of the Black musicians employed during the Depression. Not only that, but many don't know of his philanthropy, and that not only was he.
Hold up, we ain't done yet.
Okay.
Didn't he help?
Yes, I know you're talking about. He picked up this poor little girl. Her name is Ella Fitzgerald.
Come on now.
And Ella Fitzgerald came onto his band, and she became a star. Actually, even when he died, she took over the band. So many of us know of Ella Fitzgerald.
And she, for those who may not know, she was the queen of scat, wasn't she?
Queen of Scat. So again, we have to go way back in history to look at that genre of music.
But I
And
got to share with you, Mr. Miles, and I know we're going to talk about his philanthropy, but a lot of us in Baltimore don't realize how much history, how much Black American history is right here in our own hometown, starting in East Baltimore.
And that is what I'll be saying. We hear a lot about West Baltimore, but the significance, we have to think about where was the slave ships when you talk, and then the Fells Point.
Or put differently, where did Black people start in Baltimore? East side or west side?
East side. Even when you look at the Frederick Douglass house down there on Dallas Street, where he bought that block there. So again, our whole evolution was in
started in East Baltimore. A lot of us don't know that. A lot of West Siders, I was on both sides, but a lot of West Siders have no idea that it all started over there in East Baltimore, around the water, like you said, because that's where industry was, commerce, ships.
Absolutely. The building of ships, and Frederick Douglass was a caulker and whatever like that. They would do, and they created a union down there. So before we even went west, I mean, I believe it was like 1918 when the desegregation happened in West Baltimore on Druid Hill Avenue.
Hold on. You ever heard of Mayor J. Barry Mahul?
No, I haven't.
J. Barry Mahul is the root of everything you're saying. J. Barry Mahul was the mayor of Baltimore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You bear with me a second. I should have had my notes together. He was mayor from 1907 to 1911. So just for the record, J. Barry Mahul, born in Baltimore County. And back then, the county line was North Avenue.
North Avenue, absolutely. And then the desegregation that took place on Druid Hill Avenue, whereas when they set the rules, Baltimore was the precedent of neighborhood segregation.
So this was 1907.
Absolutely.
1907.
First black bought the house on Druid Hill Avenue. I believe, I forget the name, Haskell's or something like that. And then what they did was blacks was on one side of the street and whites was on another. So it was like 50%. If a block was more than 50% white, you couldn't move there or something like that.
Well, here is it a little more specifically. Blacks couldn't move in white neighborhoods.
Right. It was more than 50% white.
But whites could not move in black neighborhoods. It was
that's right.
It was non-discriminatory in that sense. They wanted to keep black and white. And let me share this with you. In West Baltimore, I don't know how much you know about the West Side, but there was a time when blacks couldn't live west of Fulton Avenue, and we couldn't live north of North Avenue.
That's correct.
Like you had to stay on your side of the street.
Yeah, so I would advise folks to read that book, Not in My Neighborhood. That gives a very good description of the segregation of Baltimore. But getting back to Chick Webb, and again, it was in 1940. He did the first fundraiser on behalf of Chick Webb with Dr. Young, where they convened and had a concert at the 5th Regiment Army where more than 10,000 people showed up of all walks of life. The tickets.
I heard they had a lot of celebrities there.
Not only celebrities. I'm going to name some that the highlighters of that particular show that raised the money for the Memorial Chick Webb Rec Center included Joe Lewis, who was the MC. You had Ella Fitzgerald, Jackie Moms Maybe, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, the Nicholas brothers, the 4 Ink Spots.
Slow down. The Nicholas brothers were the dancers. See, you're a little bit older than me. You know this a lot better than me, but they were phenomenal dancers.
Phenomenal dancers. But again, that was Chick Webb's audience. That was his friends who came to Baltimore. And 10,000 people showed up over there at Fifth Regiment Army. The tickets was $1.15. Now, the other thing that we have here is, you know how Baltimore is, how parochial we are, east and west. But we have to understand that if you look at the advertising for the Chick Webb Memorial Concert, there were so many Black businesses that supported that concert, and they was West Baltimore.
So look, I got to interject this in here, Mr. Miles, that unbeknownst to many, prior to the Civil War, Baltimore had the largest population of freed slaves in the country. And so Baltimore is a historic hub for Black culture. I know New York has more people, you know, what they got 8 million people, 22% Black. So you got 2 million Black people in New York, but Baltimore has a long and strong history when it comes to Black progress across the board: medicine, athletics, music, law. Matter of fact, I want to share this with you, Mr. Miles, because you thought you was just going to be the only one teaching.
Oh,
J. Barry Mahul was the mayor. Have you ever heard of McMecken Street?
that's right.
There was a man named George McMecken.
George McMecken, right?
He's famous because he used to lean on J. Barry Mahul. That's my understanding. And he had a cousin named Ashby Hawkins. So as racist,
S.B. Hawkins, he's the one that actually purchased the property over there on Druid Hill. Yes, S.B. Hawkins. And then the piece was, it said that he actually was a speculator. S.B. Hawkins was, you know, so he broke up that segregation of the Black and white stuff, but he was the first to purchase a house in West Baltimore over there on Druid Hill Avenue.
Yeah, I did not know that part, but I did know that he and George McMecken used to give that mayor, J. Barry Mahul, they gave him the blues. They stayed on him like white on rice. So it's a reminder to us today in 2021, no matter how bleak it is, if our ancestors in Baltimore could rock the house like they did, I know damn well we can do it today.
Well, we have a ways to go. Again, I want to talk about, the whole other thing is how parochial.
You sound discouraged, Mr. Miles.
Well,
if they did it back then 100 years ago, then I know damn well we can do it.
I don't want to be discouraged, but when we kind of look at history, and even when we talk about Mr. Dubois, who lived right here in Baltimore as well, who galvanized us at the Niagara movement in 1905. In 1905. And we have not evolved from even that spirit of the movements that we go through. And what I say is, although I wanted to talk about the Chick Webb Center, we're getting into some real stuff here. You know, so when we look at the dynamics of our Black communities, when we talk of gentrification, is it not that we give up the neighborhoods that your mother bought? Even if you look at West Baltimore in the middle class, if we never left, we would not have created the vacuum for other folks to come in.
Yeah,
and
Mr. Miles,
intellectuals leave the popo with the popo.
So, Mr. Miles, you mad at the Black people that left West Baltimore and moved to Randallstown, said the hell with the hood? You mad at them?
It's not again, let's go back east as well. You know, let's go to East Baltimore as well, because you had
where did East Baltimore move to?
Beg your pardon? What was that?
Where did East Baltimore move to? I know people in West Baltimore moved to Randallstown.
East Baltimore did too, because again, when my family also kind of grew up, and we moved from, I grew up in Somerset Projects, by the way, in Lafayette, 1200 block of Madison Street. I went to Dunbar from the 7th through the 12th grade. But when I got to the 10th grade, my parents moved to Forest Park. Although we still weren't middle class, but we moved to Forest Park. And I know many of my classmates.
You couldn't be broke living up in Forest Park. You had to have something. You wasn't broke. You wasn't.
Well, you ingenuity. If you knew my mother, she had ingenuity. My father didn't even want to move out of Somerset Project. He said, "Hey, we got heat, we got everything." My mother said, "You can stay here if you want to," but she took her children out there, and we moved. The first house she bought was on East Landell Street, right there off of Caroline Street. But my mother was a mover. She was the one that wanted to leave and go. But it was up to my father. We would have stayed right there in East Baltimore, and we would stay right in Somerset Projects. But my mother was a driver. But anyway, and then I can reflect on my friends who came up with me over in East Baltimore. They migrated to Forest Park and Randallstown, same as your West Baltimore folks who did much better. And we keep chasing these neighborhoods. We continue to chase, and we haven't created a village.
That's one way of putting it, Mr. Miles. But the truth is, a lot of people moved to the county because they were tired of Baltimore City. They wanted county. They wanted better education. They might have been tired of the hustle and bustle of Baltimore City. I mean, it's the same in urban cities around. You know, people left New York City, moved to Long Island, leaving Brooklyn, going to Strong Island. But at the end of the day, I think fast forward, your issue is now we got white people moving back into these neighborhoods.
Well, we gave up the neighborhoods. And I would ask, what neighborhood did we ever move in that we created a village where we then moved to Owens Mills and all and bought a house, but we never created economic component within those neighborhoods? We drive into the garage and come out and go to work and go about our business. I work in, and I know you talk about Black Wall Street a lot now. You may not know, but I worked there for 5 years. I was the director of the HUD office down in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And you'll be surprised, but they call North Tulsa. Folks moved to Broken Arrow. They moved to Old Wasso. And so again, when we talk about Black Wall Street, okay, we talk about Black Wall Street. I even had to share with them how we disinvested in the neighborhood of Greenwood, selectively and voluntarily. But I didn't want to go there. But we look at our neighborhoods. Where have we ever created a village? Whereas not only did we buy the house, but
that's a loaded question, Mr. Miles. That's a loaded. We have created villages. We've been creating villages for 500 years. We've just been attacked every time we get somewhat organized. And this goes back far beyond. That's why you got to get this book, because we've always had villages, whether it was Venezuela, Brazil, Panama, Florida, Oklahoma. We've always had villages, but the white folks always come after us.
We even had Sweet Auburn and in Atlanta. When we were segregated, and we created businesses as well as living in the homes. So that is where we are. Where are we creating our businesses as well as the homes? You know,
we were attacked. We were attacked in Baltimore, in Tulsa, wherever we were. Look at Wilmington, North Carolina. Wilmington, North Carolina had an election, and the Klan came through and chased out all of those newly elected black.
Yeah, and Wilmington. We talk about Tulsa, but yes, we talk about Tulsa, but yes, Wilmington was the first, and then you had Rosewood as well. So I do a little bit of that.
Hold up, Mr. Miles. One more thing. Oklahoma, if you get this book, Oklahoma had over 70 to 80 black communities. So Greenwood was just one of them. They had Boley, they had Langston, they had
Murphysville, Tallahassee, 17 black towns from the Dawes Commission, whereas the Cherokee and the rest of the tribes had to give up land and gave black folk 17, I believe about 17 black towns.
Well, I'm
And
challenging your Black history right here. I want to challenge this. Were any of those okay? So you just talked about the Dawes Roll,
the Dawes Commission, right?
the Dawes Commission. They came up with the Dawes Roll, and that's where white people in Oklahoma, they looked at a group of people coming from Florida on the Trail of Tears, and they said, "You are Indian and you are black. You are Indian,
Now,
you are black." So my question to you:
talk to me.
were any of the indigenous Americans black when white people got here?
When white people what now? When white
Were
people what?
any of the Native Americans black?
Absolutely. That's what they call the freedmen. A lot of, especially they're still having an issue with the Cherokee. You know,
So
so the
you
whole
understand that a lot of the indigenous Americans were black, but when the European came, they erased the Indian history and lumped all of the blacks together as slaves.
so what we again with the Dawes Commission, we created the about the the Native Americans awarded properties to black folk, and it created this about this I think with like 17 black towns in Oklahoma. And again, we
70
can
to
talk
80.
about, beg your pardon.
There were 70 to 80 black towns in Oklahoma, 500 in Texas.
Oh, well, again, I may have to read a little bit more then, but I
Yeah, you
remember.
talked about Antero Patella's book. You may want to check out Donnie Glover's book.
And Hannibal. I mean, are you familiar with Hannibal Johnson?
I've interviewed Hannibal Johnson many times, and he talks
Okay,
well about Oklahoma.
I
But I
know,
wanted to look.
I know Hannibal. I know Hannibal Johnson. As I
Hold up,
mentioned,
Mr. Miles. I
yes, okay.
wanted to look at how those black people got to Oklahoma, and they got to Oklahoma by way of Florida. The
Well, they
leader
got
was named, let me share something with you. The
okay.
hero in this book is Chief John Horse. He was a black Seminole, and he helped fight in the Second Seminole War. He fought to a truce, and they were led out to Oklahoma as a part of that truce, where he was promised his freedom. When he got out there, the U.S. government got jiggy with him, and so he then moved 200 black families through Texas to Nacimiento, Mexico. So, point of fact, they celebrate Juneteenth in North Mexico still today because of Chief John.
I struggle with Juneteenth. I really do. 2.5 years later, and the state of Texas was in the state of rebellion, where the emancipation freed them 2.5 years earlier. So I do struggle with that, to even make it a national holiday when in fact it's a Texas holiday. So yeah, and we can talk about the Trail of Tears. We can talk about the Trail of Tears.
Not all blacks on the Trail of Tears were slaves. That's a fact.
The Trail of Tears the Trail of Tears removed the Native Americans out of Florida and South Carolina, and again they called it Indian country. That's what they first called Oklahoma, Indian country. And again, I worked there for 5 years. I had to learn quite a bit. So I worked with the Cherokee, I worked with the Kiowa, I worked the Chickasaw and the Choctaw tribes there.
A lot of them was trying to put blacks back in slavery.
Well, the worst is the Cherokee, because they wanted to deny black lineage with the Cherokee. So they may be still struggling with that there. But
you're right. You're absolutely right. And it's a damn shame. So they complain about the white man, but they bring that same bullshit over here to us.
Well, again, when you kind of look at the Native Americans, the ones that they aligned themselves with the Confederates. You see,
yeah, they did. Yes,
they aligned themselves with the Confederates, and
yes, they did.
And then that's what brought on that the Dawes Commission. And even though I was a history major, we look at our curriculums. I didn't learn this stuff until afterwards. But getting back to our communities, and again, when I worked for HUD, under the Bush, they always, and we still say home ownership leads to wealth building. The only ones that
If you're
get
white,
wealth,
if you're white, I mean,
you're
look, all
right.
them black people during the Homestead Act, they denied black people from getting that
You,
land. So we
even
don't
in
even want to hear that.
even in modern day, as we migrate to the suburbs, whereas if a neighborhood begins to get 30% more white, they move again. So they get enriched because we pay 3 or 4 times as much for their properties that we move to, rather than invest in the properties that mama left you in East and West Baltimore and redevelop those neighborhoods. That's wealth building. And then we follow the whole economic stuff on real estate. Unless you own a whole lot of real estate, it's not wealth building. We need to talk about our home and stabilizing. When they put the language in to talk about a starter home, you say, oh, I'm gonna live here for 5 years and then I'm gonna move. You don't stabilize your neighborhood. You're gonna move again. When we gonna
So,
get the mentality of
so you,
creating our neighborhood when we had doctors, lawyers, and teachers living in the same neighborhood? Now all our professionals live somewhere else.
you got no
And then you want to
argument.
mentor, and you want to
Yeah,
mentor our kids, but you can't live next door to them. So we leave the po-po with the po-po.
you have no
I did
argument
not
here.
know when I was growing up, I didn't know that the teacher was here and the doctor was here and the lawyer was here. I didn't know that. But we know it now. Oh, what happened here? Whoa, are we still on? You got me turned on, Donnie. I was
Keep
gonna
talking,
talk
Mr.
about I was
Keep
gonna
talking,
talk
Mr.
about
Miles. I thought you enjoyed the stage to yourself. Go ahead.
dude. No, I don't. Oh, I can talk again. I wanted to get back to the phenomenal, iconic thing of the Chick-Webb Rec Center, and that we can look now at the disinvestment that has taken place. That the rec center was built in 1947. The city added the swimming pool in 1949. If we kind of look at the investment in our public areas over the course of years, when we couldn't cross North Avenue, and then you look at Rita Church and renovated it. You look at C.C. Jackson, where black folk didn't live, the recent Cahill, the Patterson Park, all of those were being invested in. You found negligence when it came down to the Chick-Webb Memorial Recreation Center. 4 years ago, the city was going to propose demolition of the rec center to put a state-of-the-art rec center there. Our vulnerable communities didn't know any better. So when we did the research to find out about the history of how Chick-Webb was built, we were able, it was called the Dunbar Coalition. We were able to preserve that. And now we're working with the city to invest in the Chick-Webb Center. You may be or may not be familiar with the Perkins Somerset Old Town project, where they demolished Perkins Homes, which was built in 1942, specifically for white folk. And of course, about 9 years ago, they tore down Somerset projects. So Chick-Webb is right directly across the street from the old Somerset projects. But again, when we look at the investment that's taken place over the course of years, the Chick-Webb Rec Center was neglected. So with the Dunbar Coalition, we was able to be ahead of the curve, find the history, and took us 8 months to have it designated historic. So over the last 2-3 years now, we are working to have expanded and improved. Currently, the city now has $21 million on the table for the Chick-Webb Center. And again, for it to be compatible with the Perkins Somerset Old Town project. And then from back in the day, this is a piece that, and because of the renowned black folk that built the rec center, this is not a East Baltimore or West Baltimore piece. This is national. When you look at all the other things that we have done here what else has been built from the ground up to accommodate our Black community? And to know that all these renowned Black folks that included Joe Louis, Ella Fitzgerald, Jackie Mobley, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, even the Baltimore Elite Giants, who were the Negro League champions,
Elite Giants.
Elite Giants, they did an exhibition ball game. The Afro-American newspaper did a fashion show, all in the cause to build the Chick Webb Memorial Recreation Center. So how is that so negligible over the course of years that we have disinvested? But now I'm pleased, somewhat pleased, because we are bringing it to light now that this is national. We're reaching out across the nation. The city of Baltimore did a survey back in April to May of 2020 to say, how can we redo Chick Webb? We got responses from different states around the country just to show that this was a national piece. When you looked at Oklahoma, California, New York, Ohio, Virginia, it surprised the city that we got responses on that survey from around the country. And that is the role of what RJY Chick Webb Council is doing now, is educating our community of this particular recreation facility.
So I got
that no longer will.
I got two questions for you. Number one,
right,
what does RJY stand for?
RJY is Ralph Jonathan Young. He was the head, that was Chick Webb's physician. He was the head of the recreation committee. I tell you, he worked hard. And Dr. Young, we're going to elevate him as well because he's the first Black doctor hired by the city's Department of Health. And he worked in that building adjacent to the Chick Webb Center, which is the Huntington Williams building, which I'm working on now to have it claimed as historic. Okay, because folks didn't know the story of it.
So look, number one, I commend you for carrying this Black history from then till now. I commend you. You ought to be applauded, Mr. Miles, for your love of our people and our history. But what I want to know is, there are a lot of Black politicians that come out of East Baltimore, going back to the first Black mayor, Clarence Stu Burns. You got the East Side Democratic Organization.
Right.
Senator Nathaniel McFadden comes to mind. He is a historian in his own right.
Yes, sir.
You've got what's his name? Bob Douglas come out of East Baltimore. Nathan Irby.
Douglas.
Right.
Nathan
so my question is, who is on your team? Because a lot of great Blacks come out of East Baltimore. Are you by yourself?
Oh, I'm not by myself, but I got a very small board of directors who are pretty much novices. I tell them that this is a graduate course because I have to be teaching them as we are emerging.
How do you get some of these more people who are not novices? How do we get Corey McRae involved? How do we get Talmadge Branch involved? How do we get Robert Stokes, Carl Stokes? These are East Side leaders. How do we get them involved?
I provide information to them all. And I would agree with you. I should not have to go through some of the loops that I'm going through. Because, you know, even when you talk to the former mayor, Mr. Young, I mean, Bernard came out of Chick Webb. Robert Stokes came out of Chick Webb.
I did a weightlifting competition over Chick Webb. They
talk about the dome at Madison Square.
Yeah.
Where did they start before they got to Madison Square, which was built in 1960s?
So what do you need? How can people help you?
Well, again, is one of the things that Dr. Young talked about was, he said, we're going to show Chick Webb that we ain't begging no more. So I'm starting with the grassroots of our Black community to understand what happened and to be participatory to ensure that we can develop this particular rec center to be nationally known. I'm not going to the Weinbergs and the rest of them until we can come together ourselves. because that's the way Dr. Young and made it happen.
So
So
you want to
many
put a
people.
phone number out here, Mr. Miles, for people to contact you with their support?
Well, my phone number is 443-413-0768. And my email is rjychickweb@gmail. We are constantly, just last week, we had a meeting with the Department of Rec because they're talking about the exhibition as to how we're going to present Chick Web through its development. It was very interesting.
Check that right there. Is this all right?
That's correct. Absolutely. So I say we got 3 Ds. Doers. When we need to go to the city and do a hearing, just show up. I'm gonna give you the information and we can testify. Well, I got donors. If you don't want to participate like that, just give. And donor attractors.
What are they giving to? What are they giving to?
To RJY Chick Web Council, Inc. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. You can look at our mission statement, whereas we're not only concentrating on Chick Web, but also the vicinity of Chick Web. When you look at East Baltimore, what you're talking about,
But Mr.
you
Miles,
have
don't you need some assistance?
I do. If I can find someone, especially in the media,
not someone. I think that this deserves the entirety of East Baltimore support.
and I'm saying,
I mean,
not
you
only
got
East
Dr.
Baltimore.
Hold up, you got Dr. Marie Washington over there. She's like the real estate guru.
Yeah. So none of them have jumped on board. It's not like they don't know the story, but
Why?
they know the story. How and why they haven't jumped on board to help promote this thing is incomprehensible to me. Mr. Young lives 2 blocks from the Chick Web Memorial Recreation Center, the former mayor.
You're telling me Chick Web is the only thing built in Baltimore by Black people for Black people?
That's right. From the ground up. I mean, early on, you got New Psalmist and all that now. But when you go back in the day, when we were desegregated and there wasn't any outlet for Black folk, it's the Chick Web Recreation Center. It's the only one, the Chick Web Recreation Center. Everything else we pretty much moved into because Baltimore was founded pretty much on the with the Eastern Europeans. You got the Germans, you had the Italians. Our neighborhood was ethnic or nationality built, and we assumed certain places. I think one of the only neighborhoods we have in Baltimore that was built from the ground to homes was Wilson Park. Anything else we moved into by displacing or gentrification of ethnic groups or nationality before us. When we can realize that. So again, it's the Chick Web Memorial Recreation Center that is grounded on Black folks' contributions over the course of years. Even the Dunbar High School and First Baptist Church, and we moved into these buildings, but we didn't build them from the ground up. You see, so again, need to capture into our heart, and it's the mission, and it's the thought that this is historical. This is Black, only in Baltimore that's Black, truly Black. So, and we're not putting enough energy behind this to make it a state-of-the-art facility. I had to deal with the Department of Rec because they wanted to put another gymnasium in the facility as it was being renovated. We're talking more of a cultural center, multi-purpose center that can be used for a number of venues rather than another basketball court. And you had Madison, which is 4 blocks up the street. You got Dunbar, you got the National Academy Foundation with basketball courts. So again, we're still talking now that we're not going to use that addition as another gymnasium, but it can be used pretty much as a gymnasium, because now we want something more cultural that would be signified. I can give you some more information as to our last meeting in regard to the composition as to what we're proposing in the redevelopment of the Chick Webb Rec Center.
Well, maybe you can touch base with the Henrietta Lacks family, because it looks like they about to come into a little bit of real money after they've been robbed for decades.
Yeah, I was in Turner Station just last week. Yes, that was something. And let me tell you something. And I understand
they always want to give us.
You went to Dunbar, right?
They always, yeah, 83.
You went to Dunbar, right?
Yeah.
You know the Eastern Health District building, right there, right up the street from Dunbar. There's been some non-disclosure as to the disposition of that property, and we've submitted over 300 signatures to preserve that building because we don't want that corner anchored with another high rise that will put Chick Webb in the shadows. So there's been no discussion as to the disposition of that building. And that building is historic because Dr. Huntington Williams was one of the first graduates out of the School of Public Health of Johns Hopkins, and Dr. Young worked in that building. That's where they did penicillin trials in that building, free health care for Black folk. Was the community educated on the significance of that? Whereas there's no disclosure as to the disposition of that property. They would not allow us to expand the Chick Webb footprint. We had to work within the footprint without explanation. So,
Mr. Miles, we're going to have to wrap this up for the day, but hopefully
I can go on.
Hey, we're going to bring you back because we're going to keep banging this information. We're going to keep asking questions until we can get some answers. But I appreciate you. The city of Baltimore appreciates you. I know it's not easy out there. And I also encourage you to keep your faith in God and pray for those who we need, and pray to God makes you aware of those who we don't need. But we are proud. I am personally proud of you for keeping this legacy alive.
It ain't about me, but also let me share with you. We're housed now. Okay. We're at the Great Blacks in Wax. We have office space at the Great Blacks in Wax. So I'll be assisting them as well on their expansion and things like that. So we're gonna connect some things, and we're gonna bridge East and West to know that it ain't all about West Baltimore, but there's some significance in East Baltimore.
We appreciate you, Mr. Miles. Attorney Shields, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Donnie. How are you?
Just loaded with a barrage of history this morning. How are you today?
Fair to middling.
You know, Mr. Bob, the more I watch the news, the more I don't want to watch the news. What you got for us today?
I don't know. Where do you want to start? You want to?
I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
This country, I'm watching the news. They're talking about the debt, extending the debt. Damn, America owe everybody. Trump don't pay his taxes. America is overextended. Is this just an American thing that we just stay in debt?
Well, I'm not an economist, but I know for certain that the largest amount of the debt that's currently pending accrued between the date of Ronald Reagan's election and up through and including Donald Trump's term. Basically, Ronald Reagan's theory of economy, which was the trickle down theory and so forth, resulted in a tremendous income or revenue loss to the country because it reduced the taxes or the tax liability of the super rich and the rich. And of course, Reagan and Trump made it even worse with the tax cuts that he put in during his term. So the issue of what will happen to the country? The interesting thing is whether the Republicans will allow in fact, whether it's even their plan to allow the economy of this country to collapse, just to support the notion that that's what good Republicans do. Good Republicans do not vote and support anything that the Democrats propose, and so we'll have to wait and see whether that holds up. And I no longer see you.
No, I'm right here. I had to refill on this coffee. What I'm getting to is, I thought you were going to touch on China. I mean, because the way it looked like America is China West China. As much as they own.
You know that Chinese companies are organized under American law and existing in this country received over $400 million in PPP money. These are Chinese companies that are funded and sponsored by the Chinese government, that are registered here in the United States, that applied for and received in excess of $400 million in PPP money and CARES Act money.
So I got to start learning Chinese. That's what you're telling me.
Well, Mandarin is the predominant dialect, the language.
Let's get started with the Ni-hao, anything else we need to know? Because I see this going down the tubes quickly. You weren't taught to be owing more than you make.
Well, I mean, remember now the whole notion of debt and I mean, it's all a fiction, right? It's all a fiction. Whether you go supply side or trickle down or wherever you do it, when you peel it away, get through the weeds and go to the bottom, the fundamental question is, how much am I willing to accept in exchange for goods or services that I can produce? I mean, that's really the question. The problem, of course, in my view anyway, and again, not being an economist, is that we've allowed people or industries other than producers and buyers and sellers to enter the marketplace. We've got this financial management group. We've got this financial investment group, that the money handlers, if you will, that all they do all day long is exchange the money. It's pass it from one hand, but every time there's a transaction, they take a little bit off the top. Well, the part which is 30%, by the way, of the economy goes to the financial management industry, financial services industry. So when you're and now remember, now these people are not producing goods or services. They're simply handling the transaction of money between buyers and sellers. And when they extract that much from the economy, it leaves a big hole for somebody to fill. In this case, a big hole that's filled with poverty.
So, Bitcoin and this whole crypto market comes to mind, because that seems to be one of the underlying premises, is to do something that the banking industry cannot control.
That is correct. In my view, again, not being an economist, the whole Bitcoin cryptocurrency movement, which I don't think really is going to go much farther than what it's gone, quite frankly. But
that's what they said about hip hop.
Huh?
That's what they said about hip hop. You never thought that we could take it this far.
But you're talking to somebody who don't even know what hip hop is. So I don't understand. I don't understand.
You know more about music than most people. You know about that lady who founded rock and roll. What's her name? Sister Rosetta. You know. No. I'm being kind of facetious, but Johnny, I think I reject the use of new labels that further divide us. Okay.
The people who are hip hop, to me, are just the second or third generation behind me. They're just, and I'd rather refer to them as kinfolk than hip hoppers. But that's just me. I think using labels, the only purpose of a label is to show that you're different from somebody else that the label is not applied to. And the reality of it is, at certain levels, we're all the same.
Mr. Bob, we have breaking news. This is fresh off the press, hot off the press, right here on BlackUSA.News. It is Wednesday, and you're not at the Board of Estimating.
You're right, and I don't have, and it is a relatively rare occurrence, but that's unfortunate, because if I'm at the Board of Estimates meetings, that means there's a protest over something. And if I'm protesting something, that means I believe that the city is proposing to do something wrong. or improper or even illegal. So the fact that I'm not there means that I don't have a protest, but doesn't mean nobody's there with a protest.
Mr. Bob, on that note, I gotta throw this question in. I gotta throw it in.
Go ahead.
It's been brought to my attention that we don't have a Arnold Jolivet today.
Well, you know, Jolivet was typecast. By that I mean every time he appeared, whatever his remarks were going to be, even before he spoke, that he was put in a certain category. You know, if you decide before you hear what a person says that you're not going to believe them or give any credence to it, then it really doesn't matter what they say.
That's how I feel about the politicians.
Yes, but unfortunately, that's the way the Board of Estimates came to be in his treatment of Jolivet. In other words, he was a permissible annoyance. He was a permitted annoyance. Very, very rarely did they take anything that he said to heart, other than lip service, and even more rarely did they actually change anything based upon whatever his remarks may have been. Doesn't mean he didn't fight hard. Doesn't mean and certainly doesn't mean that he was wrong in many of the issues that he brought. It was just their manner of treatment of him. You know, the Board of Estimates is not a forum where equity resides. It's not a place for equity.
But this is a majority. You heard the interview with Ronald Miles. This is a majority black city, and I don't know if I got to check Mr. Miles's facts, but he suggested the only thing built by for black people was Webb. We don't have anything else in Baltimore. I mean, we got a bunch of churches. I'm talking about institutions.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that. I'm not from Baltimore, and I'm sure there are institutions here. Now, if you're talking about physical monuments, if those sorts of things, but that's not how you define a people or a city. That's the problem. That's not how you define
black people in Baltimore.
Pardon?
How would you define black people in Baltimore?
The same way I would black people in Houston or Philadelphia or Chicago. We are people who, for the most part, have been taught to hate everything there is about us. We're people who've been taught that we have no valuable contribution that would not otherwise have been made by somebody other than us anyway.
You didn't teach me that. My daddy didn't teach me that. My teachers didn't teach me that. I know we are powerful.
Well, the problem is we haven't focused on changing the identity of the people that are making the decisions, and we haven't focused on training people to get into positions to make the decisions that should be made in our favor.
Why not?
That even when a person that looks like you or me gets a position, more likely than not, as a result of their background, their educational indoctrination and so forth, more likely than not, they're not going to think like you and me. They look like us, but they're really not about us. And even among our community, we celebrate and applaud and elevate those people who have been selected and chosen by people outside our community. The minute somebody opens a new Ford dealership, all of a sudden they become a spokesman for the community. The minute somebody is appointed to the board of University of Maryland, all of a sudden they're leader in our community. Well, we didn't make those selections. We didn't make those decisions. Those are distractions. That's a shell game. We have to decide who the people are, and we have to decide that based on the criteria that we establish, and we have to be the one who evaluates it. Because again, Donnie, the question on the table now, the war that's going on in this country now, is about who does this country belong to? And too often
I thought it was the Chinese.
No, we've confused and conflated the current occupancy of a political seat with ownership of the country. Just because you're president don't mean you own the country. And nor does it mean that you're going to be president forever. In fact, 2 terms. But just because you're the mayor doesn't mean you own Baltimore City. Just because you're the governor doesn't make you the owner of the state. We've conflated holding a position with ownership. That's why when we say the country owes us something, we mean the country owes something. It doesn't matter who was president when the debt was created. It doesn't matter what color. The fact is, there's a debt that needs to be paid.
Mr. Bob, I've listened to you tell me that since we started this network almost a year ago. December 1st will be a year.
Yes.
And it seems to me, and I'm not a violent person anymore, that the only way we're going to get anything is to take it.
Well, we got to start off with the proposition that's already ours. That's the problem. See, the minute
we have to reclaim it.
Now we can do that. We can do that. But the minute you start off saying we got to take it, that means somebody else has it. That means you're in fact acknowledging their custody and maybe even their ownership of it. That's wrong-headed. We got to reclaim it because it was already ours. We already put the work in to get it. We already put the hours in to create it. We already put the vision and the mission.
So let's take America to court at the United Nations.
Not a bad idea once we put the people in position to make that decision. But under Trump, they withdrew from the human relations, whatever that human relations commission is of the United Nations. We withdrew as a member of it because somebody was about to do just what you just said. So we say, okay, we're not gonna play that game.
South Africa did a Truth and Reconciliation Council.
Commission, yeah.
Commission. We need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission on the USA.
I think there's sort of such a thing even in the state of Maryland, but Donnie, it really comes back. What we need to do, I think, is recognize that the most important asset that we have, one of the most important assets we have that we can utilize, the means is our ability through the vote to change the leadership, to change the people occupying the office. I'll put it that way. And that issue is on the forefront now, even in Baltimore County, as the council considers redistricting and whether or not there's going to be a second so-called black district.
Well, I just got word that the 44th will not die. That the 44th state legislative district is not going away. It's going to be Baltimore County, and the part that's in the city will go into the 40th. I thought 44 was going to be annihilated.
Well, again, the whole thing.
That's where Keith Haynes was the delegate. Remember, Keith Haynes?
Yes,
mysteriously disappeared.
I do, and nobody's talking about that either. Nobody's talking about the why, when, or what. At least I haven't heard any explanation.
Oh, I heard an explanation. They found something funky and they made him leave.
Oh, okay. Well,
but I haven't heard that. They always knew there was something funky. He must have stopped doing what they told him to do. That's how they kind of do black politicians. Before you get in there, they put you in this little black book, all your dirty little secrets. And then as soon as you don't do what the man wants you to do, then they start leaking it out to the press.
That's true. There are a number of so-called hold cards out there that in various people's pockets, and you don't play your hold card till you need to. You don't turn your card over till it's the last hand.
I know he served Angelos' law firm, whatever law firm he was with. I saw Keith Haynes in Annapolis, and his behavior at this one particular hearing was egregious. The entire Baltimore City delegation leaned on him. I could not believe my eyes. This educated black man with a law degree was up there representing corporations against black people. Shameful. Shameful. I saw it with my own eyes. And so did the other senators and delegates in the room. Egregious.
And I'm sure that's not the first time you or other folk has witnessed it. I'm sure that Keith Haynes isn't the only one who's exhibited that kind of conduct over the years. In fact, my guess is that it's more often than true than not that type of conduct exists. Remember, again, Donnie, I don't offer this by way of excuse. I simply offer it by way of observation. And my observation is many of us, as a result of our training, our background, our enculturation, our indoctrination, are simply white folk hiding under black skins. And so it's a masquerade.
Mr. Bob, who we like for governor?
I like the young brother Wes Moore. I'm going to tell you the truth. and I like him because he acknowledges what he doesn't know. He's willing to come down from the pedestal and say, help me.
I think your birthday's around the same time. Did you know that?
I did not.
I think your similar birthdays.
When is his birthday? Mine is December 4th. I don't know when his is.
No, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Okay.
But he ain't far from your tribe, though.
But you know, I've had several meetings with him along with other friends and relatives, and I call relatives or members of the family. It doesn't mean biologically related, but that means connected at the cerebral and, more importantly, at the level of the heart. We've had several meetings and discussions with him. I'm going to be meeting again with some of his folks even tomorrow. But again, the most impressive thing about him is that he acknowledges what he doesn't know, and he simply asks for help. And, you know, our first meeting.
Is he going to be one of these candidates, one of these black candidates like Anthony Brown, like Ben Jealous, who brings in national people to run his campaign, national people who tend to ostracize us locals, because we've seen that movie.
Yeah, and I've seen the inclination for that, and in fact, that is one of the issues that we're going to be talking about tomorrow. That's a path that can't be followed, because the reality of it is the same kind of people you engage and hire in your campaign, even though the names may change, are typically the same kind of people that you put in the administration should you be successful. And if that is, you're right, we're just going to have a repetition.
Speaking of which, did you see this news about Governor Larry Hogan's former chief of staff writing himself all kinds? This man is fake. How do you go from chief of staff to 20 years in prison? And I guess what comes to mind are some of our black delegates, some of our black elected officials who what's the word I'm looking for? Who betrayed their careers for as low as $15,000.
Yeah.
At least
Donnie,
he was getting up in the millions like Kathy Peter.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Donnie, we got to take what it should mean, in addition to this one individual's plight, is we need to take a look at all of the so-called independent agencies in the state. Maryland Environmental Services is notorious, as is some of the other agencies, because they operate basically outside of the rules. Like they created a set of rules for them separate from the rest of the rules that most other agencies have to deal with. And so,
similar
to the Maryland Stadium Authority, for example. This has been, you know, the Maryland Stadium Authority was created originally under Schaefer to do one thing: build a stadium. Now you see the Maryland Stadium. Now they do any and everything. Whenever some level of government thinks they need to expedite something, all of a sudden it becomes a Maryland Stadium Authority contract, or Maryland
including money from the lottery for education.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. The money and the power is funneled to agencies that don't have the same level of oversight as the regular agencies. And we've got Maryland Environmental Services, Maryland Stadium Authority, but see, our people make those decisions. And what gets me is sometimes when people say the government is people. It's not something out there that has a life in the heart of its own. It's people making decisions, people in positions of authority making decisions. And if we focus on that and change those people, then we can change the outcome. And until we do that, we're like Don Quixote said, you know, we're shooting at windmills or whatever he said. I don't know.
I got to give Fox some credit, because I swore that they only put up guilty black people on the television screen. But damn if they didn't put up Larry Hogan's former chief of staff, McGrath. He's all over the news. Now, he ain't going to last longer than 24 hours before they find some more black fugitives to put up there on the Kyle Jackson report, because he would all run away, escape black people.
Well, that was just too big to ignore. But put aside from Fox now, I had this thought earlier this morning, and you know, reading something else about what Trump, and whenever the news media, the major news media, refers to Trump and the conspiracy theories and all that sort of thing, they say Trump without evidence said. Well, why don't you just say Trump lied? What is this crap about without? Is that the same as a lie? Why don't you use the word lie? Trump, and because if you use the word lie, then you got to justify why you keep repeating it. Lies don't belong on the same stage as the truth. They're not entitled to equal time.
So here's a rather rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Edmund Burke said the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. When are good white people going to outnumber these other white people who only care about themselves? I mean, I look at what they're talking about at the border, about 100,000 people coming from South America, from Afghanistan. And Mr. Bob, I didn't even allude to this. We haven't had you on since the men on horseback with whips were hitting my Haitian brothers and sisters with subway bags at the border.
Right. Right. And you know, the as I told other people, the Haitian people are the only ones who are attempting to enter this country as a result of conditions over which they have no control. They're the only ones that had an earthquake. They're the only ones that's here because of the hurricanes. Everybody else that's trying to enter here is because of some kind of political situation in their own company that they had to stay in their country to fix. This is not a safe haven to elude or evade dealing with your own problems. Because the fact of the matter is, we have institutions that can be overburdened, that can be overcharged. You know, that we can't run out of water, we can't run out of housing, we can't run out of classrooms. We actually can't do those things. Are not infinite; they're finite. And so we do have limited resources that have to be sometimes sparingly made available. So, in my view, the Haitians, if you have to establish priority for immigration, they belong at the top of the list, not at the bottom.
They black, Mr. Bob. Stop playing. This country let you know they ain't playing with black people. They gave us horses.
It's not this country. It's that the people who currently occupy the positions of authority in this country. We can't keep conflating that. I'm not going to say this country anymore. I'm going to say the people who occupy the positions of authority in this country, because I own part of this country. I asked a brother the other day. He said, I wrote a Declaration of Independence for black people. I said, who are we declaring our independence from? I said, do you believe that we own part of this country? He said, yeah, but who are we declaring? Who are we independent from? Who are you declaring our independence? He couldn't answer it because we've gotten so used and accustomed to the notion of being victims. We've been so used and accustomed to the idea of being homeless. We've been so used and accustomed to the idea of being valueless that we talk about the contributions we've made, but we talk about the contributions as though we made the contributions to white folk, right? Who always will run the country. And I don't accept that as a matter of truth. All these people are people who today occupy positions of authority. And if we work hard enough, we can change that.
They didn't work hard enough. They stole, lied, and killed.
Of course they did. And as I told Armstrong Williams the other day on one of these on his show, when he started talking about the federal government, you know, why do black people want to ask for so many giveaways? I said, hold it, Armstrong. Let me just give you.
Armstrong said that. I'm going to call him up after this. Armstrong said that.
Yeah. So I said to him, wow. Look, in 1862, federal government passed the Homestead Act. Under that act, each and every one of the white settlers got, first it was 320 acres, but then that was too much. They reduced it to 160 acres, but ultimately this government gave away 270 million acres, and nobody was talking about the government was giving away too much. 270 million acres. And I tell you, quite frankly, ownership of the land is critical to our survival, to the survival of any people. Because the land is the only non-replaceable asset that exists in the world. Everything else, go ahead.
Let me shift gears for a second. You don't have your mask on, shawty. That was a play on words. The mayor said, wear your mask, shawty.
You know,
the mayor has COVID. What does that say?
It says he caught COVID. That's what I caught COVID. I had COVID pneumonia a month ago, and I was fully vaccinated.
You're not the mask.
But I made the mistake of not wearing a mask in a place where I should have. I made the mistake of confusing a political statement about mask wearing with the facts of it from a health point of view. You know, when the government was trying to say to people as a reward for getting vaccinated, you won't have to wear the mask, and I got confused. I thought that was a health statement. That was a political statement. So because I was vaccinated, I started going places that without a mask. So I got COVID pneumonia, and I was hospitalized for 3 days. But I tell you, during that 3 days, enlightened me to a lot of things, because I saw a lot of other people come in who were not vaccinated. And I'm telling you, They went either one or two places. They didn't come in the room where I was. They either went to ICU or the morgue.
What is God telling us?
What is God telling us? The same thing he's always told us. Do what I tell you to do, and you'll be all right. That's always been his message. Do what I tell you to do, and you'll be all right. Don't do what I tell you to do, and you act at your own peril.
Any final thoughts, Mr.
My thought is this is going to be a better day than yesterday, and God willing, tomorrow will be better than today.
Good deal. Attorney Bob the Shield, we thank you for joining us this morning. Donnie Glover. We'll be back this evening at 7 p.m. You might want to catch this show tonight. The show on Sister Biz. They got 4 white women discussing white privilege.
What time?
7 p.m. right here on this network, BlackUSA.News.
I'll be back. See you.
Good morning, world.